What's up, y'all? It's your boy Jason here with the gquPS Bros. Coming to let you know that the official date has been set for the anniversary episode, and then it will be Thursday, April the 21st, episode 53. So mark your calendars down, make sure you check it out. A lot of big things planned. And make sure you continue to get us some messages for the anniversary show. And again, get those to us by Thursday, April the 14th. That way we have time to get it into the actual show. And again, these are just messages to let us know what you thought about the first year of the gquPS Bros, what you liked, what you didn't like, favorite segments, favorite moments, things like that. Send those to us at gquPS@gmail.com or go to gquPS.com, click the message link, or call us at 405-877-BROS, or hit the gquPS Bros pages on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and TikTok. You know what it is. Whichever way you want to, hit us up. But remember, when it comes to all things gquPS Bros, make sure you like us, love us, share us, and follow us. Because if you like us, why wouldn't you?
Welcome to the gquPS Bros podcast. I'm your host, Terrence, and with me is my co-host, Jason, calling in from the Batcave in Indianapolis. Jason, how are you, my good man?
Hey, man, I'm good. A great day because it's time to get down with another episode of the gquPS Bros. I'm ready to do this. 3 more good topics for you folks. Let's get into it.
Okay. Welcome again. Thank you for listening. This is episode 47 of the gquPS Bros podcast. For the uninitiated, gquPS Bros is the podcast to hear. We are a weekly podcast of fans of culture, current events, sports, life, and entertainment.
And as always, we're your hosts, Terrence and Jason. And every single Thursday, we come to you with a brand new episode where we discuss the current events of the day, sports, and the athletes we love.
And even some of the athletes we love. No matter the topic, you can expect a brutally honest and fun exchange of snark while learning through the lens of our 30 years of friendship that originated in Calumet Park, Illinois.
And folks, for more gquPS Bros content, connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube under the handle gquPS Bros and gquPS Bros Podcast for more behind the scenes of the show and just to engage with us every single day. But do not forget that the gquPS Bros Podcast is available to listen and subscribe for free wherever you listen to podcasts.
Like us, love us, share us, follow us. And folks, if you like us, hell, why wouldn't you?
That's right, folks. Like Terrence says, we are the podcast to hear and watch. So make sure you're living it, loving it, and doing it.
Okay. Jason, as we almost embark on our 1-year anniversary of the show, pretty soon we're going to be talking about the state of the podcast. But before that, we got to talk about the state of the nation, the state of the union, dog. For a show that was hell bent, that was staunchly opposed to being a political show, we talking politics like a motherfucker on gquPS Bros.
Listen, we're not a political show. Us talking about the State of the Union doesn't change that. So it's okay. We'll be okay. Listeners will be okay. It's fine.
Yeah. It sounds like something you'd say, like, don't get your pennies all up in a bunch. Everything will be okay.
I don't think I've ever used that line before, ever. So thank you for telling lies on me. Thanks. Appreciate that.
Oh, so you wouldn't have said, hey, just have a sip of your beer and relax?
Hey, I haven't said that in a while, but thanks for reminding me. I need to bring that back.
Yeah. Anyways, the first segment we're going to be talking about President Biden's State of the Union address. And State of the Union addresses are always funny to me. First off, you've got a president who hasn't had a lot of success in terms of having legislation passed yet. So, and this is the first State of the Union for President Biden anyway. And then you combine that with the fact that, okay, in the backdrop, oh shit, we're about to go toe to toe with Russia, not full on war, but there's some beef there, and shit is not cozy. So the State of the Union, people were kind of waiting with bated breath for what the president would say. And I'm referencing an article from NPR by the journalist Domenico Montero, 5 takeaways from Biden's State of the Union address. President Biden's first formal State of the Union address focused on Ukraine, inflation, the coronavirus pandemic, and a 4-point unity agenda. He urged world unity and standing up to Russia, listed ways he's trying to address rising prices, even if they likely will have limited to no effect in the short term, and offered an optimistic outlook about the end of the pandemic. Biden made mention of some progressive policy items, such as the need for robust voting rights legislation, and stood up for transgender and abortion rights while leaving out some other topics, such as climate change. And he also touted some of his accomplishments of the first year, such as the COVID-19 relief bill and the bipartisan infrastructure bill. But the speech's emphasis on many of Biden's centrist policy positions, like not defunding the police, was a clear choice in an election year. It was reminiscent in some ways of Bill Clinton's 1995 State of the Union address made after Republicans' historic gains in the 94 midterm elections. Before we even get to these 5 takeaways, dog, there's a lot going on there. They're already comparing President Biden to Bill Clinton. I could make the argument that midterm elections are not shaping the tenor of these speeches. Jason, thoughts on that?
I would have to agree. Like we mentioned in the previous episode, go back and check that out, folks. But it's midterms are what they are, but the big game's all about the big four. In this case, we look at 2024. But I will say this: one of the big observations that stood out to me, and again, just what I saw with my eyes as opposed to what I heard with my ears, which we'll get into that, is I almost feel like we have to point out, or be important not to point out, given that yesterday was International Women's Day, that we actually had 2 women in the background behind Biden when he was talking. Kamala Harris and Pelosi sitting back there as the vice president and speaker of the House. Thought that was pretty cool. I've never been a big fan of watching the State of the Union address, but in all the pictures I remember seeing of it, I don't think I've ever seen that. You know what I mean? So, to go to history, and perhaps one day we'll see a picture where we have the woman standing in front talking and 2 dudes in the back. Put the woman up front. One day. It'll happen one day. Another thing with my eyes I kind of thought and saw was people seem super fake. All standing up and clapping and applauding at almost everything he said. I'm like, okay. I know not everybody who stood up and applauded and agrees with what he's saying. I know for a fact. There's no way. Including Mr. Ted Cruz, who, pardon my language, man, resting bitch face like all the time. And that was no different than not last night, but when he did the State of the Union, which was last Tuesday. So, I don't know. Now, there were some people out there definitely, for sure, expressing their displeasure with whatever he was saying by not, standing up, giving kind of the sarcastic golf clap, or people yelling out and saying, I don't know who it was, but basically people yelling out when he was saying stuff and whatnot. That was pretty interesting as well. But a lot of he hit on a lot of topics, because I watched this on YouTube yesterday, the whole thing, and he hit on a lot of topics. I wasn't expecting him to do that, which is good. Obviously, there's a lot going on in the world. That's important. However, there's one thing that he didn't mention, which I'm going to go into later. But Terrence, what did you think about it? Did you watch the whole thing, some of it, all of it?
So the day of, I watched the latter half, and then the remainder, I've just been kind of looking at snippets, much like we're kind of referencing this NPR article here. So I caught a lot of the, as you mentioned, the pomp and circumstance, because usually the State of the Union is a big deal. The rafters are full with people, right? Well, COVID protocols, they had to strip that down a little bit. I also like that they put the fences up right before that speech started, like literally last week or the week prior, because they was like, hey, just in case some of you dumbasses want to kick off the sequel to the January 6th cosplay party. We got something for y'all ass too. Don't worry. Yeah. So yeah, I was not surprised that he had so much to speak to, because when it's your first one, you got a lot to cover. And you especially have even more to cover when you don't have any landmark legislation. Like, look, I don't care who you voted for in the last presidential election. The reality is, this is your president. This president has much to accomplish. Every major piece of legislation up until this point, he hasn't been able to even get past successfully because he doesn't really have a legit coalition. I mean, when you've got fellow Democrats shitting on what you've presented, then the conditions are not right for success. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more anyway. So the article talks about this. This was a much more unified looking Congress. And to me, that's all about perception, right? And many people, because they're just so fed up with politics anyway, they may not even know how the State of the Union address works. So typically, whatever party the president happens to be in, if you are of that party, typically you're standing and applauding. This is the fake part Jason was referencing. Meanwhile, the other half, the opposition party, sits quietly, voices their displeasure. Or in some cases, not so quietly, voices their displeasure. Now, when it came to matters of the heart, Ukraine, of course, everyone's going to be unified, because if you can't unify on that, man, there is no hope for this country. Okay.
Agreed.
I also think that the president was trying to get ahead of what we call the endemic part of COVID-19, where, and we've talked about this on the show before, where as opposed to us trying to live with COVID-19, it's life after COVID-19, which is effectively, hey, we've gone through about 2 years of mandates, vaccine protocols, you name it. And so the American people in general are ready to hear, because that's at the end of the day, that's all he can sell right now is optimism. When gas is damn near $5.58, that's all you can do is sell hope. He talked about inflation. There's no getting around it. We've already talked about it. Gas was out of control. Natural gas costs were out of control. And this is before the shit went down in Ukraine. Okay. So any hopes of saving his political agenda, he's got to put that front and center, because nobody wants to hear what the fuck you're talking about when gas is damn near $10. I'm sorry. Nobody wants to hear it. And it does not matter what party that person is from in the White House.
Is gas really $5.58 in Chicagoland area right now? I'm asking.
Shit, I'm asking. You got gas, buddy.
I'm asking for a friend. I'm asking for a friend. So yeah, I don't live in Chicago, as people know. So gas isn't in the fives here, unless it went up dramatically. I've really been outside today. So, but that notwithstanding, yeah. So he definitely started his speech off talking about Ukraine and Russia, which I have to say is probably the right move, because that's the biggest thing going on right now. However, I was a little concerned with how much he was talking about it, and I wasn't sure if that was going to consume the entirety of his speech. But then again, I watched it on YouTube, so now I hit the little time button and realized, okay, he's talking for an hour. He's probably not talking about this for an hour. It's okay. One thing about that, though, that he did point out towards the end of that segment was that he mentioned that there are no plans, and they're not going to go over to send troops over to help Ukraine defend the U.S. They did say they would get involved. They would get involved if Russia tried to take over like any type of NATO territory, stuff like that. That's when he said we would get involved, as far as soldiers and stuff like that. I'm like, okay, we'll see. Hopefully, it doesn't come to that. Russia and Ukraine both had too many people dying over this No offense to them, but we don't need any of our guys, being part of that either. So if not needed. Also, one of the other big things he talked about next, like you mentioned, was COVID-19 recovery. And he mentioned not living with COVID. And when he said not living with it, what stood out to me with that term is that a lot of people on social media have been saying, hey, we just need to stop worrying about this. We need to just learn how to live with it. It's always going to be here, blah, 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 blah. Just kind of like taking a sort of a defeatist attitude, more of an attitude. I'm just trying to get over my life now. I'm tired of wearing a mask. I'm not talking about vaccines no more, blah, 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 blah. But he said, like you said, that no, we're still going to combat this. We recognize that new variants are coming up all the time, and we're working on procedures to get stuff in place where we can create a vaccine within 100 days, as opposed to a matter of months, to fight all these new variants. Now, obviously, I'm not a vaccine guy, as I mentioned. Well, I'm not into this vaccine, but the fact that he said that, I'm like, okay, at least they're trying. I'll give that. They actually care about things like that. He also mentioned parents concerned about the under 5 years and under kids getting their vaccine as well. He touched on that a little bit. The one thing I kind of had to chuckle and laugh at a little bit, and had like a yeah right kind of a thing, is when he mentioned domestic manufacturing. Making things made here as opposed to having to go out to China and all the other places to get things where we can be more independent essentially. And I'm like, it seems like that people have been saying that for decades, as far as presidents, stuff like that. But yet, now it's not to say that more things aren't made here compared to 20, 30 years ago, because they probably are. But it seems like all the bigger things, probably more important things, are still made in China and other places. Now, I don't want to keep naming out China, but that's kind of always the joke. Things are always made in China, quote unquote, So I kind of chuckle at that a little bit, because I'm like, that's the one thing I'm like in my head, I want to see that before I believe it. Because I feel like they talk about that forever again, and it always seems to be a thing every year. Also, he mentioned, in particular, you mentioned also too that there was trying to be a theme of there was a unified Congress, and he mentioned that a couple times as well. But then I'm like, you sure? Based on what? Because like you said, he hasn't really got any legislation passed.
They unified it as in they not beefing openly. They beefing behind the scenes. They doing some shady shit.
Well,
it's the stuff like Joe Manchin dive bombing legislation at the 11th hour, when objectively he could have just said, "Hey man, I'm not voting for this shit in its current configuration." I'm like, you can't report on that beforehand before I'm out here looking like a fucking idiot. That's the shit I'm talking about. So it's a fake unity.
Well, I kind of feel like when he said that, based off the tone of what he was saying, I couldn't tell if he was referring to the nation is united, or if he was talking about people in the building at the time he was making that speech were united. Because I almost kind of feel like, either in both cases, that it seemed like that's not correct, based on what you were saying. Yeah, for the State of the Union address on certain topics, it might be united, like the Ukraine topic. Yeah, they're not united there, as like you said, we should be. It seems like with everything else, there's always going to be that disconnect, which unfortunately is going to leak over into, everyday Joe Blow like you and me, where unfortunately, yes, there is a divide in this country when it comes to political lines, which is what it is. I'm not sure if anything's going to change that at this point, but it's almost like you mentioned with the COVID, like people, like he mentioned living with COVID.
The COVID, what is this? Oh, the Ohio State University.
Moving on. So when you're referring, to people saying living with COVID, this may be something we have to live with now with the whole political divide. I don't know how it can get better, other than having the perfect candidate in there, which isn't Joe Biden. But the one thing that I was kind of surprised, not necessarily in a good way or bad way, that he didn't mention as far as the topic he didn't mention, was, well, for lack of a better term, we'll say race relations. I'm very surprised. And there was an article I found, I believe it was via NPR. Matter of fact, it was NPR, a different article, that not one time did he mention the word black or race in his entire speech. And I kind of have mixed feelings about that. And I'm like, okay, because we mentioned before that I felt like he was kind of pandering to the black community and women vote when he was getting elected, and when he's talking about the nomination for the Supreme Court spot, I kind of felt like he was pandering. So I'm actually kind of surprised in a positive way that he didn't bring up race or the term black. At least he wasn't pandering. But on the negative side, I'm kind of like, well, now that we're talking about the State of the Union, but specifically, I'm kind of negatively surprised that he didn't mention anything about it at all. Even when he was talking about the nominee and the name, the lady's name, forgive me, I really can't pronounce it. I've been struggling to do it.
Ketanji Brown. That's what you're talking about. That's who you're talking about.
Ketanji Brown. Thank you. So even when he's talking about that, briefly when he mentioned that, he didn't bring up again her race at all. Which again, in that aspect, good, because she's more than just that. She's a qualified candidate. And he mentioned all the qualified when it comes to all the people in fraternal orders and unions that are backing her for that spot. But I'm just very surprised that he didn't bring that up. I think he missed the mark when it comes to that overall, when it comes to him bringing up race relations in this country, when it comes to any aspect, whether it be police brutality, racism, whatever, institutional racism rather. But very surprised that he didn't mention that at all, not even for 5 minutes.
I'm not surprised that he didn't bring it up, because number one, you're talking about someone who is a Democratic centrist. So, and we ran into this. It's funny that NPR article mentions Bill Clinton, when a much more recent example is Barack Obama. When President Obama was elected, everyone was thinking, oh my God, this is such a symbol of hope, and it's going to change everything about the way politics works in America, ignoring that Barack Obama was nowhere near as liberal as his opponents would ever lead you to believe. I mean, that's about as sweet. Barack Obama, Bill Clinton, Joe Biden. It's central casting of being right in the middle. Switzerland. They're not trying to change shit. And so that doesn't mean that they can't be a beacon of hope and a beacon for changing things in America. That just means these people ran as middle of the road candidates. So when we project our expectations on these candidates, thinking that, oh, here's what they're going to be, here's how they're going to govern. Yeah, everyone's got a plan until, oh shit, I don't have 60 votes for that. I got to come up with something else. That's why Build Back Better didn't get fucking passed, because he ain't got the votes. You could have literally the cure to fucking cancer in these bills, and if you don't have enough votes to get this shit put in the law, it's dead in the water. So it doesn't surprise me that race was de-emphasized. Specifically, if you are of the race that is black, that was de-emphasized, because Joe Biden is running a centrist re-election campaign. He's already in re-election mode. He's already in midterm mode. And he's fairly certain he's going to get his fucking ass handed to him with the rest of the Democratic senators and representatives that are going to be up for re-election if something isn't passed soon, asaptually, that improves the economy in general for average folk. So when he said he didn't believe in defunding the police. I was not surprised because we already covered this on the show as a strategy. Trying to propose to people to defund the police doesn't work. I remember when that campaign came out, and my immediate thought was, even if you had a point when you said you wanted to defund the police, any well-reasoned individuals would not align themselves with your cause because you're throwing the baby out with the bathwater. At least that's what it comes across as. So I'm not surprised that President Biden said, no, I'm not in favor of defunding the police. And so that's how we end up with this unity agenda where he talks about the middle ground. Basically, hey, here's things that no matter who you voted for in 2020, you should be in favor of. Because this is his last best hope.
So two last things I want to point out. One is that NPR also mentioned another separate article about this. Them, NPR, PBS, and the Marist poll company put out a survey right after the State of the Union address. And they pointed out that Biden had a significant boost in his, basically approval ratings after that speech. Again, which I know I mentioned before, Biden had didn't have really great poll numbers as far as approval ratings, whatnot. If anybody's interested in kind of checking that poll out or the information about, just go to maristpoll.marist.edu and you'll be able to find an article. It was an article mentioned from March 4th. So check that out. It's interesting enough. But yeah. And the other thing I want to mention, kind of a lighthearted kind of thing, is you mentioned Switzerland. And Switzerland obviously has its reputation of being in the middle and not want to get involved one way or the other. But even Biden mentioned during the speech that even Switzerland's getting involved with trying to back Russia off and fighting against Russia. Even they're getting involved. So that should tell you a lot about the whole Russia-Ukraine situation. If Switzerland is making a stance and getting involved one way or the other and not be just sticking in the middle, hey, there's your sign right there if anything else, bud.
Yeah, next thing you're going to tell me that Japan is making PlayStations for this war effort.
I mean, they probably are. Hey, we're on PlayStation 5 right now. I'm sure there's plans for PlayStation 6. And maybe those plans got moved up a little bit because of this stuff. So we don't know.
That's a Chappelle Show reference for the kids at home, by the way.
Good old Chappelle Show. Chappelle Show. Chappelle Show. See, Terrence, that was an appropriate place for you to throw a line in there. Brett, not bring your kids. You messed it up again, bro. Come on. I'm throwing them out there to you.
No.
Come on, man.
Nah. No, I would say, in general, the State of the Union, it's important to at least be informed. Number one, no matter who you voted for, at least know what's being talked about. And then second, this is another thing that fascinates me about State of the Unions. President can't even get out of the damn chambers of Congress, shaking hands, photo ops, and all that shit. Immediately after, the opposing side has a response. That has got to be so confounding. I'm like, fam, I can't even get into my damn limo, and you already ready to talk shit about my agenda.
Well, I mean, that comes with the territory, man. I mean, I see your point. I'm not disagreeing with you. But I thought this comes with the territory. No matter whether it's a State of the Union or not, if he makes any kind of address at all, even like when he was addressing the COVID situation with the vaccine, people are going to be, critical about that. Even from his own side, the Democrats. I think it comes with the territory. Yeah, that's what it is, man. Like, and that'd be the case. He didn't feel as a Republican in the office. Definitely when Trump was in office, I know people were ready to tear what he said apart. Hell, people definitely did that anytime he said anything. Deservedly so, because he's an idiot. Yeah. The opposing side being critical when you're a politician, let alone the face of the country politician. Yeah, people on the other side will really jump down your throat with anything you do, because it's never gonna be perfect in their eyes.
Or don't do.
Right, exactly. And that's where that divide goes. I mean, it's always gonna be divided along political lines. It's just a hard line this time. And that's going to show itself when it comes to the public opinions and criticisms when he makes a speech.
Yeah. in that case, you just got to be like B Rabbit and 8 Mile. It's like, listen, I'm already bring up all the shit that I know you about to rap about in this battle, and I'm just gonna put that shit out there so I can steal some of the thunder. I present that objectively for the President Biden, not because I'm the biggest Biden defender, but simply if you know that you don't have major legislation passed, fucking talk about the 800-pound elephant in the room and be done with it. Why? Because not talking about it is also not helping you.
Facts.
So, all right. Okay. That concludes our first segment on President Biden's State of the Union. Coming up next, we'll be talking about the Texas abortion phenomenon related to geography. Coming up next on Cal Park Bros.